All right, welcome to JDC West Management, or JDC West 2015 Management Information Systems case presentation. Thank you to our judges, Nick Hoblik-Sue from MCO, Brad Zimmer from Federated Co-ops Limited, Greg Hutch from ISM, Aftab Ahmed from Deloitte & Touche, Nancy Smale from Stonefield Systems Group. The competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, the judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask the presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask the audience to exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. Competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
First of all, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you for joining us here today. It's a brisk morning in Saskatoon. Glad we're indoors here to present today. We are here to present to Jason as well as the colleagues from Quest Designs. My name is Emily. I'm here with my colleagues Richard and Colby, and together we are Forward Consulting. So first off, as consultants for the Management Information Systems venture, we see two common themes. We see change management and we see system implementation. So as we're looking at the information and the documents you provided us with, we see this common theme. We see which system is going to be the most efficient for you moving forward, and how is this change management going to occur. So as we've gone through our analysis, our recommendation, as well as our implementation, we'd like you to be aware of this theme and how we have been able to overcome each of the issues associated with this. So to start off, we have an executive summary. We've identified a primary problem is that Quest Design's current information systems are not equipped to manage the projects of increased complexity. So as you are working with this building development and we're seeing 100, 200, 300 floors, you've previously worked with 100, 200, or 300 condos. You've previously been working with 20 condos, which is quite much smaller of a scale. So when we're looking at doing this on a much larger building, we need to look at the complexities that are going to occur there. So with that, our recommendation is to implement a comprehensive system which includes Slack, Dropbox, and Rike, while using more effective change management techniques. As you have tried to implement a system previously, we believe that our change management will more effectively make sure that this system does not fail. So I'm going to take you through our analysis today. We've started off with a situational analysis, analyzing three key components. We're looking at the context, the resources and capabilities of Quest, as well as some constraints that we are seeing. Currently, it is July 6, 2015. You are building your biggest project yet. We're looking at quite a larger scale from what we've previously experienced, or from what you've previously experienced. As well, two decisions are needed to be made. Do we redesign as we're moving forward with the building? Are we going to target more of a family-oriented business or family-oriented consumers, or are we going to continue moving forward with the young professionals? As well, what system is going to be needed to put in place as we're moving forward. So we're looking at our resources and capabilities. What do you have right now for you to powerfully move forward? You have 24 competent employees. You've seen great success with your projects previously. Everything has been done on time, it's been efficient, and it's worked well for you in the past, but is it going to work well moving forward? As well, we've seen some constraints. There is 1 week until you need to make a decision on whether to break ground on the first phase. So this is a very strong factor in our recommendation. Time is definitely not a resource that you have right now. As well, constraints internal buy-in. With our previous system we put in place, we didn't see the buy-in from the employees, and we need to make sure that they are going to buy in the future. So looking at our problems that we've identified 4 key secondary problems, which led us to 1 primary problem. Our secondary problems is that internal communication is inefficient. So we're looking at inefficient use of email, BBM, sending files, project management. There's just no system in place for this communication. You're losing time, You're losing valuable work hours as well as money in this. So another issue that we've identified is that the team did not adapt to the last system. As I've said before, there was a high abandonment rate with the system you previously implemented. Another secondary problem is that the target market is not as expected. In the first week, the people that were coming to your open house were not the young professionals that you were trying to target. Instead, it was families of 3 or 4 people, which is not what we were expecting. As well, lacking the change management technique. So your change management previously was not effective in getting your employees to use the project system that you were using before. So that leads us to our primary problem, which is that Quest Design's current information systems are not equipped to manage projects of increased complexity, which is the project you're working on right now, which shows how important it is to implement the system quickly. So as you've seen, there is a decision to be made. You've invested $45,000 in consumer research investment. So you've already spent this $45,000 to see who is the consumer that you're targeting with the location of your building. And from the information we've received on your employees, they are competent, they are reliable. So we believe that this information you've received is reliable moving forward. Your decision to change in a week, to change to a different market of people buying your apartments, we don't believe that this is a good decision. The families that have shown up so far have been seeming to like what they see. As well, 50%, if you decide to change to market towards families instead of young professionals, you're going to see a 50% increase in internal communications. So right now, that influx of information for your employees will just be impossible for us to implement a system along with that. If they're already receiving more information than they're used to, and we're trying to implement a system, there's no way that we're going to see effectiveness with the implementation of the system, and we'll just see this continuous downfall of information transfer. As well, poor change management historically, as I said before, it's going to be difficult to get more information and change the system hand in hand. And the location is just outside of Vancouver. So if we're looking at places like Richmond and Burnaby, you see that Vancouver has a great TransLink system right now, so targeting young professionals is a great idea as you're going to young professionals that are going to be wanting to work in Vancouver. These hubs are going to be the perfect place to build these buildings, which makes sense to us why you'd be targeting young professionals. So overall, our decision is that for you is to not move forward with the changes in design. We do not see that this is going to be an effective use of your time, your resources, or your employees. So looking at your current strategy, Quest Designs is a real estate developer focusing on building rentals in Alberta and BC in underserviced areas. Just to give an overview of what we see that you do. You have 24 employees. They're competent. You have various project managers. And when we're looking at what your project managers really do, they are only working on one project they're working on one project with various people underneath them, and they're the hub for information transfer. So right now, when your project managers are running a project, they're getting information from every single person under that project and having to transport the information to every other person underneath them. This is not an effective use of your project managers, as they should be more watching the project go along and make sure that dates are being set instead of transferring all this information. Looking at your system. So we're looking at your current system, the insights we've seen about your system, and the needs of your system. So right now, it's fair to say that there isn't much of a system in place. There's lots of emails being sent. Easy Project was an attempt you made to centralize all this information, but there was no buy-in with your employees. As well, text messages are being sent, phone calls are being had, Microsoft Office is being used, there's meetings, and you're using WhatsApp and BBM. So as we can see, this is a lot of different tools that are being used, so this information is not being transferred by the same platform between each of these. The insights that we've seen is there's no centralized repository. As I said, you're using MS Office, you're using WhatsApp, you're using BBM, and this is spreading out your information along various different systems instead of keeping it centralized. The information transfer is not secure. If you're sending something from across WhatsApp, who knows who has access to your information? It's not a secure platform for you. Phone calls as well as emails. We need to make sure that everything is kept in a centralized system to make sure that no information is being sent to the wrong person or people don't have access to it that should not. As well, you're lacking uniformity. This goes along with using MS Office, WhatsApp, BBM. There's no one system that you're using. So from identifying these insights, we've discovered some needs that you have. You need an effective internal communication system. a centralized document and data access system as well, and effective project management software. So when you're working on a project, we want to make sure that everyone can tap into the same project, and an email does not need to be sent with everyone CC'd on it. People that don't need to get this information are not getting it as well. And we would like the system to be easily adaptive with an innovative design. So looking at your process, communication is taking up an excess of time. 90,400 emails are being sent through this process. That is a lot of emails. If you think of 2 to 3 minutes per email being spent reading these, this is not an effective use of your employees' time. As well, work days are lost. As you said, there's been 5 days a year of work lost. That's $1,250 per employee and $30,000 a year. This lack of a system is causing large losses for your company. As well, one person managing a project, managing all emails, as I said, we need a central repository so that these emails are all managed in one place. So looking at our options, we've discovered a few key components that we see are necessary for the system moving forward. The system needs to have data security. There needs to be compliance. It needs to be efficient, effective, cost. It needs to have a reasonable cost. As well, it needs to have an impact on profitability and an ease of implementation. So we've looked at 3 different options for you here. Igloo is our first option. As you can see, Igloo does have quite a few strong. We've looked at our full circles as being 100% and half circles as being about 50%. So when we're looking at Igloo, it does look like a viable option, but something that is a drawback about Igloo, it's not slick or fun to use, and it lacks project management features, which is very important to us, to you. As well, Podio. When we're looking at Podio, there are some strong points of it, but also some weaknesses. But overall, there's no archiving ability, which doesn't give you access to your previous files you've done, and it lacks time tracking. So what we've come to the conclusion is that we need to create a comprehensive platform. So this is going to be about $411 a month, and it includes Slack, Dropbox, and Rike. With that, my colleague Colby will be taking you through our strategic recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason and colleagues. So I have 4 goals here outlined. Reduction in time for employees spending in their communication. Reduction of time the employees spending communicating. So by implementing this process, we will be more efficient. Most importantly, it'll be much quicker and easier to obtain. The security of this information transfer, we don't want it to be lost, as Emily mentioned. We don't know what the security protocols of the current, such as WhatsApp. We don't want to lose any of that information. And most importantly, we want to have our files held in a centralized location. We don't want to be chasing through emails and trying to find these files. That's where a lot of time is lost. And as well as we want to have an efficient transition of team management into the new system. Oops. So I have a 2-part recommendation. So part 1 is we're going to hold off on the redesign. You've already spent, as Emily mentioned, $45,000 in the market research. It does not make sense right now at this point in time to change. For that, we could see upwards of 50% loss in revenue. That just does not make sense for our current timelines, as well as our scalable growth that we'd like to achieve. So that's why we're going to proceed with targeting that young business professional. Part 2. I've got 4 parts to this part 2 section. Our internal communication. I'm going to recommend that we're going to use Slack. This is categorized by our topics. The communication is categorized by topics, teams, and divisions. So it's very, very user-friendly, and you can have multiple conversations going at one time. So building into that, you have the ability to group message as well as private, and then it is secure, and it's available on all mobile platforms. Moving in towards the project management side of it, we're going to go with Rike. The most important thing is the real-time reports of employee projects. So you can see where employees are currently on a project, where they need help on a project, and how to proceed further. It's very intuitive, and it has very lean user interface. It's easy to use, and going back to the failed previous implementations, we wanted something that'll be slick and easy to use. Another neat thing with it is that you can attach files to this, but it still requires you to search through it. So going into that, building off of our central database, you'll have Dropbox, so that all employees will be able to access this Dropbox. Most importantly, you'll establish a uniform filing procedure. So this is that. Then you do not have to spend the time chasing through all those previous projects or emails. Everything is going to be organized and efficient. And this will also minimize data loss. at the end of the day, this will all reduce the amount of time that you're looking for files and just become more efficient. Most importantly is the change management. We analyzed all these tools and we selected these 3 core components for that they are easy to use. And that was the most important thing, is we wanted to minimize any risk of this change management failing. To avoid that, we're also going to have training seminars. So you will have a 1-week seminar to start off right away. My colleague Richard will explain into that, as well as aligning goals. So the most important thing is having everyone understanding and generating that buy-in into this. By having that buy-in, we'll be able to generate more revenue, more wealth, not only in our BC and our Alberta locations, and then we'll become a more prosperous firm. So our outcomes, as I stated, foreseeable savings of about $30,000 by implementing these programs, that there will be no more loss of time in chasing around these files. It will also increase inter-firm communication, and it will be a more efficient technological process. It'll be easier to use, it'll be more streamlined, and it'll be able to be scalable. So when you do start other projects, say in Alberta or other ones in BC, that it is a core process that you'll be able to implement into other areas. This will also help us with our competitive positioning of the firm for future prosperity. And now I'm going to pass it off to Richard, who's going to go over our implementation.
Thank you, Kobe. So I'm just going to take you through the specific timelines that you would be looking at when you want to implement these platforms, as well as heavier on the change management side of when you should implement the workshops and what the content of that should be. So in the short term, within the 1 week kind of period, you should look to communicate the changes to your team. So this is firstly being the fact that you're not doing the redesign because, as we said before, it's a rush decision that with no real tangible value that we see, as well as that you're going to be integrating the new platforms for project management, communications, as well as the file sharing. Then you're going to contact the vendors to set up any vendor support they may have for the business operations side of your business. So similar to how Evernote has a business support department that walks you through specific implementation protocols that you should have when you're thinking about implementing Evernote, we believe that Slack, Rike should have the same concepts. Then you should look into holding a town hall meeting to identify the key pain points and the opposition leaders. As we all know, with every change in the organization, there's always some certain employees that aren't as receptive to them as we would like. So definitely identify them and leverage the pain points to generate the buy-in for employees when you recommend that this is the direction that we're heading as an organization. And then in line with that, definitely identify the influential supporters that are part of your workforce. These people you can rally behind and really use to communicate the ideas of why you're doing what you're doing and help the employees understand. And then establish the protocols for effective file sharing and file saving. So personally myself, I really like file trees because they're very clean cut. You know exactly where things are. So definitely establish protocols and set file names for each employee to use, so that you can take advantage of those clean-cut methods. Then in the medium term, between after the first week down to about the completion of the first phase of development, definitely work with vendors to cement the proper implementation protocols. So that being, what's the frequency of workshops that you should host, what content should be delivered, how many hands-on experience should they have with the program before you implement into the entirety of the workforce, and then develop the training protocols, as I've previously mentioned, then establish some KPIs that would be key to monitoring the success and the impact of these 3 platforms. So first being abandonment rates, second task completion time, and manage the expectations of your employees with those KPIs to see, we expect that with these platforms, task completion time could be reduced by X amount, but that's more or less how we see, and that's our expectation for you as an organization, so that everybody knows, what's coming, how much of an impact is it supposed to have, and how they should work to utilize these platforms to the full ability. Then lastly, definitely ease the transition into the comprehensive platform. So that being give a little bit of leeway in the beginning as to, if there's an emergency, you can switch back to a little old protocol. However, it has to be with, solid premise. Otherwise, people are just going to start reverting back to the old modules, and the abandonment abandonment rate would increase. Then looking at long term, definitely look for new development opportunities. With these three centralized tools, we definitely see that your employees may have more time on their hands than you've seen before, and that gives you room to look into other expansions within BC, Alberta, and do what you do best, which is to develop real estate. Then finalize the monitoring protocols that you would use to calculate and gauge the performance of your employees with these new tools. And then also, as we all know, security and emergency aren't always foreseen, so definitely look into those and see what you could do with those. And then that's just a quick summary of our kind of 5-day seminar with costs associated. And now my colleague Colby will take you through the risk mitigation.
I'm going to go over a couple quick risk mitigation. So slow buy-in. We're going to have additional training seminars. And another risk would be a lack of sales in phase one. This will give us the opportunity with our new change management structure that we could potentially look at redesigning those future phases. But having that structure is the core component to being able to pull that off. And now I'm going to pass it off to Emily.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. We do feel that we have assessed your change management and system implementation needs. Thank you for joining us once again. We'd now like to open the floor to a question and answer period.
All right, thank you. This concludes the presentation. Question and answer period will begin at 5 minutes.
Thank you for your presentation. I had a question about the implementation schedule. You talked about the early part, kicking it off. As we got into the heavily build out of those units and those phases, could you talk a little bit more about your implementation schedule?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So looking to the implementation, I'm assuming you're asking about the kind of medium term.
That's right.
Yeah. So within the first, definitely, as you know, the best time to hit employees with change management is within a very short term time period, right? So within the first month, we're going to have the 5-day consistent kind of seminars. Just take a block of time out of the employee's time every day and have them run through each kind of scenarios that you would see with each of these platforms. So for Slack, how do you categorize, right? How do you tag? And how do you kind of communicate to each other? For Rick, just kind of walking through the user interface that you would see with that. And then as you move on to kind of months 2, 3, and 4, it's more of a monitoring process, and you would have a workshop bi-weekly or monthly, depending on how you gauge your employees' buy-in to be at that stage.
Thank you.
I have a question. In your options slide, you identified that a comprehensive platform has its full marks for ease of implementation. So 2 parts of this was, one, can you justify to me how implementing 3 different platforms is going to be easier compared to implementing 1? And then the other part of that question being, with those 3, how do you foresee the interoperability and the collaboration between those 3 tools? Is there a risk of a lot of double entry?
So with your first question, the ease of implementation, these are fairly easy systems to use. And with each of them, we think that I guess the ease of implementation goes along with how effective they're going to be. Maybe we could say that it's going to be more difficult to implement 3 at the same time, but their effectiveness is going to be a lot higher as we gave 100% of the effectiveness. So implementing each of them, they are fairly easy programs. As well, people may have experience with them previously. I know working in a business, I used a lot of Dropbox, so our employees should have some experience from their previous with Dropbox, as well as using Slack, which is a messenger platform. So with these 3, they each have easier implementation, which combines them to make an easier implementation process. As well, for your second question, sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question?
Has to do with how these are all going to communicate with each other and the risk of double entry.
So with each of our platforms, they are quite different in what they do. Dropbox being the way that we would mitigate that is by having a clear set outlines of what each one we're going to use for it, to make sure that our employees are aware of how to use them and they're not double entering things into both platforms, that they're well informed of Slack is going to be used for this, Rike is going to be used for this, and Dropbox is going to be used for this, so that they are not putting the same information into both platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead,
I have a quick one on the KPIs. So in terms of the change management piece, you mentioned some KPIs that you would implement to measure the success of the change, and especially in in a slightly complicated environment, sort of a hybrid model. I'm wondering how you'd address some of the measurement aspect of that, or if you thought of that in terms of abandonment rate. What if they use 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3? So what would define some of those KPIs, and how would you actually sort of tactically measure those things?
Definitely, that's a great question. So when we thought about that as we were developing these recommendations, and basically for abandonment rate, the 2 out of 3, so the first thing we want to do is eliminate the inefficiencies in communications as much as possible. So we'll be definitely focusing a lot on the Slack and Dropbox aspect of it, just so that there's you can see a time reduction in task completion as soon as possible, and then that'll generate more buy-in for employees as well, because they see that okay, I've done this in Slack, I haven't used whichever texting, calling methods, and I can see that my product completion time has been reduced by a week, as an example.
So from a project risk perspective, we have identified compliance and security and regulatory. Just want to make sure, I know you have touched on it in your presentation. Could you please align the two for me? I wasn't able to see it in the presentation. Maybe I missed something.
And you're talking the municipal legalities of project, the condo development?
So there were 3 risks identified: compliance, security, and regulatory. And
Stop.